Do you want to learn the tricks that top leaders use to get the most out of themselves and their teams? Well, Naftali Hoff is here to help. Lead to succeed. Picks the brains of top leaders to learn about their challenges, insights, and best practices. Here's Naftali.
Hello, Lead to Succeed Nation. It's Naftali Hoff, and welcome to Lead to Succeed, episode 154. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Meny Hoffman. Meny is the CEO of PTEX Group, an award-winning branding and marketing agency headquartered in Brooklyn, New York. A lifelong entrepreneur passionate about creating winning strategies that help growing businesses flourish, Meny has been successfully helping brands grow and thrive since 2001. He is the founder of Let's Talk Business platform, a movement to provide entrepreneurs with powerful tools needed to learn, grow, and lead. Meny is a popular speaker who shares his strategies at regional corporations and conferences, and I've had the pleasure of being on his podcast, and I'm delighted to return the favor. Meny, so glad to have you on the show today.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the warm welcome.
My pleasure, and I love to read people's bios, but I know they do a much better job than I do in really telling their story. So give us the backstory. How did you get into this? We'd love to hear more.
Sure. So it's been a while, so we're gonna have to go back in memory lane. It's been now over 23 years since we started PTEX Group, and as a young kid, as I grew up, I always liked to create stuff. And I was, when computers were relatively new as far as home computers, and my friends and peers who were starting to play car games, I started to create. My first business card I created when I was like 14, 15 years old. At that time, I was looking to publish a sefer, a book, a Jewish book. And I was feeling that, I want to use my creativity of creating something. As I grew older, and I wanted to do something for a living, I naturally had this connection to graphic design at the time, not branding, not marketing. It was more like straight up graphic design. And the reason for that is if you sell a product, you made a transaction, you exchange that for money, and the person used the product, and that's about it. I felt when I create stuff, graphic design, that has a longer shelf life. That person will use it over and over and over again, and ultimately reaping the rewards of the work that I've done. So that was like my introduction to graphic design. As I was starting to do that, I started feeling out what's going on in the marketplace, and that led me to say, wait a minute, there's something called graphic design, but there's something totally different, which is called branding, marketing, and so on and so forth. I got into it. I started hiring one person, second person, and that's how the agency PTEX Group was born. Throughout the years, we constantly saw different needs in the market where we felt that people needed different services in order to complement the branding and marketing initiatives that they do, such as call center, web development, and services like that. And that's how we expanded to other services. Each service has its own story, how we got to it, and then ultimately why we started to do it. But ultimately, we found out that people love to do what they need to do best, which is running their business. And everything around it, they want to outsource to great people around them. And we wanted to be that partner in order to be able to provide them those services. Our mission at the time was consider it done. Like, do what you do best, delegate the rest, give it to us, the branding, the marketing, printing, call center, web development, everything like that. Throughout the years, we have niched down again, like in just even recently, about 6 months ago, we rebranded more strategically because the level of work we've been doing in the branding and marketing side has been really, really high quality, and ultimately to make sure that it doesn't get in the noisy world, and it actually we able to cut the clutter, so to speak. We actually took the initiative of rebranding and strategically positioning ourselves to match up with the quality of work we do.
So does that mean, wow, there's a lot there. I want to unpack it, but just to clarify in one detail, does that mean through this rebranding that you have removed those other those other verticals from within the agency? You've spun them off. What happened there?
Great question. So at one point, we brought them, actually, it started off as auxiliary services. And then we saw a need of people trying to outsource as much as they can, and we brought it in. Our positioning in the marketplace, and this is just a branding lesson for anybody listening to this, we saw the need. People were looking for this one-stop shop. And what I say about one-stop shop is that people always ask me, are you not the jack of all trades? You're having all kinds of services under one roof. And my answer was always, the concept of the Whole Foods. Once upon a time, you went to the meat market, to the fruit market, and so on and so forth. And then came these beautiful supermarkets. What did they do? They didn't diminish the quality of the produce. They didn't diminish the quality of the meats. They just developed those services within one umbrella's organization, so to speak, in one experience. We did the same thing. So all these services were being ran by different people. Recently, we went back to say we've started seeing that people are looking more for the specialists in those different services. So to answer your question directly, we went back to the model of separating some of those services, giving it its own identity, and then every department focusing only on that and being able to market it separately.
So I'm going to ask you a question. Thank you for clarifying, by the way. I'm going to ask you just another clarifying question. I think I know the answer, but I'm not positive. I always want to hear from experts. And I'll give you a quick backstory. When I started in my current work, so I've been leading a coaching business now for about 11 years. Prior to that, I was in the world of education, and I saw that as a natural transition. I've been in leadership. I want to help other leaders grow. I want to help people to really see what their challenges are and push through those difficulties. And I called my business Impactful Coaching and Consulting. And I really, if I'm being very honest, could not properly articulate, I can now, but then I couldn't properly articulate the differences in fine detail between coaching and consulting. It almost felt to me that they were just two words just expressing the same service. And of course, that's not the case. Marketing and branding, I feel, to some people, kind of blend. They don't necessarily see a clear distinction between the two. So if you could just take a minute to educate us, what at its core is marketing? What at its core is branding? What's the primary difference between the two? And why are these services so important? Especially today, you talked about a busy marketplace. You talked about so much going on in the world, trying to find your voice, trying to stay relevant and stay seen, visible, right, to your audience. So let's unpack that piece a little bit, please.
Yeah, so this is a great question. I think a lot of people confuse the two, and I'm happy to shed some light on it. So I'll do an introduction to this, which is general business. There's 5 pillars for every successful business. The first pillar is value creation, which is your product. What are you bringing to the marketplace? Then there's the marketing aspect of it. Then there is sales. Then we have value delivery, which is your product, the operations of the product, of delivering your service or whatever it is. And then there's the finance. Those are the 5 pillars of every successful business. Now, if you miss any of those, you probably don't have a successful business, because if you have a great product, nobody knows about it, it's flop. If you have a great product and you don't deliver it, you ultimately are a scam, because you're selling something that you can't deliver. And if you're doing all of those and the finance doesn't add up, ultimately at one point you'll have to go out of business because you're not been able to survive. Now, in business, which you do and which is the most, let's say you're starting a new business. Somebody listening to this episode and they're starting a new business. They need to know about all 5 and have a tentative plan on what they're going to be doing on all 5 of those pillars. However, they might focus on one more than the other in certain parts of the journey. For instance, you could see a lot of tech businesses. They know that finance exists, but it's not so much about the profitability versus getting market share. Sometimes you could see somebody, I'm focusing very much on my product, therefore I'm not doing any marketing. But you need to know that those 5 exist. And at one point, you need to know who is responsible and what's your plan of action on those 5. Now, going back, as I mentioned to you, marketing. Marketing sits in the second part, which you have a product, you're delivering that value. Now you need to market it. Where's branding? Branding is actually part of the development of your business and developing of your product. For instance, value creation, you're bringing something to the marketplace. When you bring something to the marketplace, let's speak about a product or a service. Let's speak about a product first. There's a need in the marketplace that you're trying to fill. So when you go through this process of what type of need is there in the marketplace, and how do you want to deliver that value? And how do you want people to feel about you as a company, your brand? So that's part of that development. It's the foundation of everything you're setting up to do, regardless if you're ready for marketing or not. So that's part of that first process that you want to develop. And let me give you some examples. So Starbucks sells coffee. Okay. The end product the person is buying is a cup of coffee. The brand positioning, it's all about the experience. So that's what they want people to know about that. When people say, let's meet in a Starbucks, subconsciously, what are they thinking about the experience, about sitting there and having a good time and drinking a coffee? But it's all about the experience. Dunkin' Donuts also sells coffees to certain times, even more than Starbucks. And now obviously they're called Dunkin'. They drop donuts, which is also a branding lesson there, which we could unpack. But as far as the coffee, it's all about the convenience. So they want that truck driver on the road says, "Where's my closest Dunkin'? I want to grab my coffee and in and out. I don't need the experience. I just need my coffee." Now, both of them are selling coffee, the end product, but they've built a brand around how they're going to develop it. Because as soon as you have that, next comes marketing, as we said before. Now I know who is my target market. Now I know how to market it to them. So when you see a Starbucks coming up with an idea, we're going to be rewriting the name on every cup that of the customer coming in. Wait a minute. One person will say it's going to enhance the experience. The other person will say, well, it's going to delay waiting in line. But if the target market they're going after is the person that's coming for the brand positioning, which is the experience, I don't care about the other person. Yes, if the other person that will come in for a quick coffee will service them, will take their money. But the whole business, the premise of the brand, and all the decision factors of the brand is related to branding. So I say, when you brand a company, it's a commitment that this is what we stand for. And this is how we're going to develop our products. This is how our pricing will be. Then comes marketing is we need to get the message out. And you could have all kinds of initiatives. And what type of marketing you're going to be doing? Offline, online, peer-to-peer, going to events. These are all marketing strategies, but you already have the foundation and the branding in place. You're not marketing without any branding in place.
I love it. Wow, a lot to unpack there. So let's stay on the branding side for now, because I think marketing is maybe more technical and certainly not the focus we typically go into on this in these conversations here on Lead to Succeed. But I think branding is very relevant because there's so many different angles on the branding side. Obviously, there's the founder story. There's the why, so to speak. Why are we in business? Yes, you talked about before about identifying need in the market, but sometimes there isn't necessarily a need for your services in the market, and yet you want to present yourself to the market anyway. And you want to present yourself in a particular type of way that might be unique.
Exactly.
Or a particular location or particular level of service, whatever that might be. So if I'm looking at what I would imagine to be pretty much an infinite range of possibilities about where I could take my product or service, and I'm thinking now as the leader, but of course, anybody who's involved in the decision-making on the branding side, what are some of the key things you advise many people to consider to allow them to focus more intently on where ultimately their branding should go?
Great question. So the first thing I want to say that when you develop a brand and a brand premise, it could be just about developing the what you do, and that becomes the premise of the brand. You could also develop it on the how you do things. Let's say you're a landscaper, okay, and you're the 10th landscaper in your community. So obviously, on the what you do, you're not going to develop a brand around it if you're doing just about exactly the same service than anybody else. But if you come into the market and say, we'll do it differently. So the how you do it could also be a brand positioning of how we position ourselves. For instance, you see a lot of companies, we're a fintech company, we're a technology-driven company. So you're taking a commodity product, let's say credit card processing, you're building technology around it, and now you want to be seen as a fintech company. So your brand positioning now changes into the tone, the voice, the tone, the messaging, every touch point with the customer has to match up to that brand positioning. So that's just a clarifying point that people sometimes ask me the same question. I'm selling on Amazon, I have a brand on XYZ, and there's a dime a dozen. could I develop a brand around it? The answer is yes, because you need to be able to, yes, you need to be able to stand for something. So we need to be able to grasp on something that we're going to position you on, which you're going to commit to, but it could be either the what or the how. Another very important thing, especially if there's listeners to the show that are more earlier in their journey of business, it's a very important thing which I make sure to communicate properly. Branding could be a very expensive part of development, which means is not so much, yes, it could be expensive financially. It could also be, as I mentioned before, it's a commitment to the pricing, to the market, and so on and so forth. It's very important that you have a proof of concept. You know where you're going by the time you're going to start branding. So if you, let's say, are a successful company and you have multiple brands, you have multiple services, and you know exactly, oh, I want to enter this market and I want to brand, then great, you know exactly what you want to do. If you're starting off and there is chances that you're going to pivot pretty quickly, or expanding your services or adding your services or moving into different verticals and so on and so forth, sometimes it's too early to brand, and the branding could actually hurt you, because now you're coming out with a very strong positioning statement, and tomorrow you're adding services and people don't know about it and they don't feel like, why are you offering this service? It just doesn't belong with part of your brand. So I just wanted to clarify that, because it's a very important point, that the timing of branding is also a very critical point.
Okay, so I know you're an expert on leadership as well, and of course, this is a leadership podcast.
Sure.
So to me, it's a natural outgrowth of our conversation so far. Let's talk us through. I mean, you could talk about PTEX and how you've done it in your own company, or observing and possibly even coaching companies and leadership, particularly within those companies, to go through these kinds of conversations around primarily branding, I would imagine, marketing perhaps to a lesser degree, but any aspects of business development, frankly. What would you say are some of the biggest mistakes that you see leaders making in these areas, either from a strategic standpoint or perhaps from a leadership standpoint, as far as how they do or do not utilize their people, the communication that you're observing, things of that nature?
Yeah, so this is a topic that I'm very passionate about, and I could go on as long as we have. I just want to go back to one point to connect the dots from branding and marketing to leadership. People don't realize that branding sometimes could be more important internally than externally, which means building your culture. Part of building the culture and being known, my business stands for something internally, to have a great foundation of attracting good talent, knowing what your company stands for. We have a lot of companies, in particular in the healthcare space and so on, in similar spaces, where we won't do any of the external branding and marketing. We'll only do the internal branding, which is creating the brand guide for our existing employees, what we stand for, what our core values are, our ethos, and so on and so forth. So it's a great connection back to understanding leadership. Now, I'll be vulnerable for a moment. Where did my leadership education start? It basically was in the early stages of my company, as we started hiring the first person, the second person. And we live in a world, it's very easy to grow a business, which means is if you start off something and you have your brother, your sister, your friend starts giving you business or referring you a friend of a friend, and you speak to somebody that started the business 3 months in, and they're loving it. I'm doing what I'm passionate about. I'm making some money. I have my clients. It's the dream. It's the American dream, as you call it. What happens? Speak to that same person 6 months in, 12 months in, and the tone changes. What changes? Because now they have to manage the growth. They're starting to get more clients. I'm already hiring my first employee, my second employee. Now I went from doing everything myself, the best, because I was the best at everything. Now I have to start delegating. I have to start expanding. I have to start creating that org chart, and I have to start giving over certain of the responsibilities. I have to train my team, and I have to train my customers. So, which is the easy part of growing a company, the managing the growth, which is the hard part. And myself, as every other entrepreneur, early on, I faced that challenge, and I said, you know what, I need help. I want help, and I started going out to leadership events and conferences and so on and so forth. I still remember with one event that I went. It was a 3-day training. It was an eye opener. A lot of the concepts I share up to, till today are some of the, what I learned at the time. And I remember after the second day, towards the end, they went around the room like, what's your biggest aha moment so far? And they came to
Great
me,
question.
and I said, coming into this, I had all kinds of reasons to believe my employees are at fault where we are in the company. Walking out, it's all my fault. And person said, asking me the question says, don't be so harsh on yourself. What's going on,
Right.
Meny? And I said, no, because I learned two things over here. I'm the leader. I'm not a manager. I'm not the boss. I'm the leader. So either I'm going to get those people up to par to exactly what they need to do in order to grow, or I have to show them the way that they're not capable of doing it, and then set them free. So if I don't do any of those two, whose fault is it? It's me as the leader. And that was like a pivotal moment in my career when I started seeing there is something about leadership. It's not just a change of words between manager and leader, boss and leader. There's a responsibility of a leader. And that was my foundation to say, me now, currently as a CEO, and I always share, people ask me, you're the CEO, what's your job? 80% on the business, 20% in the business. 80% on the business is stuff if I don't do, not a single person of my 30 plus team members will do for me, because it's my responsibility. My job description has responsibilities of vision, understanding where we're going with the company. On my list of responsibilities is the culture, making sure we have a tight, good, healthy culture, marketing, and so on and so forth, and the plan. So when you start speaking, so that became a very, very valuable tool for me. That shift in mindset was a very valuable piece that I said, you know what, I want to learn more and more and more. I remember early on, I got acquainted to Michael Gerber with his book, E-Myth Revisited, and so on and so forth. And these concepts started saying, you know what, there is a foundation of growing a company, and at the core of it is your people, because without people, you don't have anything. And it's something that it's a common out there, the 4 Ps: people, process, product, and profit. Obviously, which one is first? It's always the people, because you can have a great product. If you don't have the right people, then not gonna, your company will fail. You could have a great service. If you don't have the right people on the selling side, on the delivery side, you need to have that great culture. And from day one, from that day on, so to speak, I figured I want to build the best culture ever. And I could say very proudly, throughout the years, we have people that are still with us. We have people that left us. Everybody will still mention and the culture that they had, because we have a culture. Now, speaking about culture doesn't mean ping pong tables and babysitting service. Culture means a culture of excellence, which means there is a standard of how we operate. There's a standard of our ethos of how we could hold each other accountable. There is a standard of growth. Those are the things that you infuse in your culture. So people say, you know what, maybe I'm not going to be there forever, but while I'm going to be there, I want to learn. I want to deliver value, and I want to get value from the company and the people around me.
Nice. It's kind of interesting. You anticipated the question I was going to ask you about culture. You mentioned it. I thought maybe I'd still be able to ask it, but then you went deeper, which is great. So I didn't even have to ask the question. But it's also interesting because tomorrow I'm going to be doing 2 leadership trainings for a large company, and the focus is going to be on empowerment. So the focus is going to be on helping leaders to understand that it really isn't about you anymore. I often refer to it as the shift from me to we, right? As you're developing yourself, you're trying to build your credentials, you're trying to get noticed. So it's a lot of me focus to do my very best work, obviously for others, but also for my own personal benefit. Once a person is elevated to a leadership position, it's a totally different framework, focus, of course, but also the metrics by which you are measured. The ultimate success that you have is not because you're still the very best at doing whatever it might be. Let's take sales, for example. Maybe you were great as a sales representative, a salesperson, and now you get elevated to the sales manager. So you're leading the whole sales team. But your focus is no longer picking up the phone and just calling as many people as you can. Your focus is on empowering. Your focus is on training. Your focus is on delegating. So maybe you could speak a little bit more about how you empower your people to be more conscientious, to sort of build your own leadership pipeline, whether they stay with you, whether they then move on to do new things, different things, maybe even better things, at least on a scale size. What does empowerment look like to you? And why do you feel perhaps that some people are hesitant to empower as much as they should?
Great question. And I think in the question lies the answer, which is that most people, because they're not prepared for leadership, they just, let's say they started a company, the hands were in every single piece of the company. Now they have to start delegating, and maybe they had a horror story about they delegated something and it turned out to be, a failed project or a failed relationship, whatever it is. Chances are they weren't prepared and they didn't delegate properly because they didn't have the mechanism of how to go about it in a slow phase in order to make sure that the outcome will be what they expect. So the short answer is every leader has to ask themselves, as they're starting to grow, how does winning look like for me? And this is actually a guide for your listeners, free guide on our website. If you go to ptexgroup.com/winning, which is a simple one-pager, which is ask yourself, how does winning look like? Like, close your eyes, ask yourself, in 12 months from now, where do I want to be? And that could be a metric. It could also be where you want to be as a leader. Like, do I want to take myself out from some of the project, the day-to-day? I want to focus more on the business, whatever those goals are for you. First, know that. And second of all, you got to be intentional about getting there. So a lot of business owners and leaders have this envision where they want to go with the company, but they're so stuck in doing it, that they're not intentional about saying, look, I have to pull myself out slowly but surely, and get there. Now, the mechanism of it is that we live in a world that if you get great people, they want autonomy, and nobody could deny that. If you don't have people that want autonomy, that means you don't have A players, because A players today's day and age want autonomy. Now, people are afraid of giving autonomy for two reasons. One, who is going to get the credit? B, what if I give them autonomy and it doesn't work out? I have the answers for you leaders. First of all, every time one of your people deserve credit, take some of it, pat yourself on the shoulder, maybe not publicly, maybe in your own office, but you have built that culture, you have built that infrastructure. So it's part of your success. So that takes care of the credit part. And if that's not enough, we gotta have a one-on-one. Something is wrong there. Number two, which is the part of people are afraid it's not going to work out. That's something that I've learned the hard way. Again, another vulnerable moment, which is you got to inspect what you expect, is a line that I use a lot. Some people say, here's my new hire, take the business, take all operations and run with it. All of a sudden, 6 months later, oh, it's a sinking ship and they have to turn everything in reverse. You take a leader, get the understanding, what's the outcome I want from you? And what's your plan of action? What are you going to be taking? Fine. The person comes back with a plan of action. How are they going to implement it? Now your question is, what's our mechanism of keeping me in the know? So, if we speak about EOS, there's the level 10 meetings or general strategy meetings or one-on-one conversation, whatever your mechanism is. You inspect what you expect. And there's the check-ins that you have to have till you're comfortable this leader is taking it. You know what? It's similar. The analogy I use is, sometimes you have a new hire and you say, I want you to include me in the emails. And then you go to CC, carbon copy me in the emails. And then you say, you can just be CC me on the emails. And at one point you say, don't even be CC me. Like, what's that process? The trust factor goes up and up and up and up. You say, you know what? You're doing good. I don't have to be CC'd or be CC'd on every email you send to the clients. The same thing is with the leader. The delegation process and the trust factor has to be built. And most people that have a horror story and never delegate properly is because they went too far right from the get-go. They didn't have the ways of tracking the results, they're making sure that they're inspecting what their expectations are. And therefore, they never delegate again. They never give autonomy again. But if you do it right, that's how you empower your people. And ultimately, those empowerment, they're now empowering other people. And now you have a whole team of secondary leaders and third level leaders that could actually get you to focus on the business while all the operations and everything else is being done by your team.
Wow. I heard a lot of situational leadership towards the end there. Ken Blanchard's model of, really delegating carefully and strategically based off of the person's readiness, their motivation, other factors. in that model, it's only the fourth quadrant that's actual delegation.
Exactly.
It's interesting. You're directing and you're coaching and you're supporting, but you're not really delegating until the end. And people often don't realize that. They think it's like a one-time action, right? You do this, here it is, it's yours. And then you often do have challenges. What I wanted to ask you really as the lead up to my final question for this segment
Sure.
is one thing that I think often happens when I have conversations with people who have been successful, who have self-awareness, who've had their moments of difficulty and challenge too. They've come to learn either through their own taking their own internal temperature or some other means how to identify their weaknesses, their blind spots, where they're supporting other people and where they're getting in the way, and figure out a way by which to create the right kind of balance of they're doing the right work and they're allowing other people to do what they should be doing. What advice would you give to leaders who are either consciously or just wondering about this? They have blind spots or they're not sure. They oftentimes don't want to feel vulnerable to people internally and to have those conversations with their own people. At least they're not ready for it yet. What's some advice that you have for leaders to gain that kind of clarity, to make those determinations so they know exactly what to focus on, how to show up every day, what kind of personality they have and how that affects others, these kinds of things?
Sure. I don't think that I've ever had a leadership event or speaking to problematic leaders or employees of leaders, and it wouldn't come down to communication as the core issue that's causing that friction or whatever it is. So one of the most important things for a leader is communication, and clarity is you could play around which one is first. First, you have clarity, and then you have to have communication, how to communicate it, or you have to have a mechanism of clarity. But to answer you directly, your question is, as a leader, you have to have at least two very close employees that you feel comfortable sharing with them, and they should feel very comfortable sharing with you exactly how they feel about you. Those are the people that will be coming into your office saying, you know what, I think we're biting more than we could chew. Every day you're taking us in a different direction. We need clarity over here. And those are the people that if they give you feedback, you should be able to say, thank you for that feedback. I'm going to try to improve, and go back to them to ask them, do you see any improvements with my way of communicating or my way of doing leadership or whatever it is? If you have a culture of company, I don't care if it's 5 people or 50 people or 500 or 5,000, you cannot have a close knit of a couple of people that could be brutally honest with you and they could be the voice of the rest of the company, so they could the feet on the ground and they could bring you that information, and you're not acceptance of that information, at least from your closest, then there's a big problem. But if you are receptive to that information and you're willing to make change, I think leadership is something that you can learn. You could learn and you could become better and better and better. And as Dave Ramsey said, a business, an organization will never outgrow its leader. And if you're not constantly growing in your leadership, in your strategies, in everything that's happening, and the world is moving so fast, then ultimately you're going to linger the success of your organization and ultimately all the people that are in the organization. So your goal needs to be to constantly be open for feedback and open to ask if they're seeing change in what the feedback was all about.
Very powerful. I remember I was struggling as a head of school, dealing with certain issues of change management and relationships and things like that. I'll spare the details for now, but one of the changes that I made at a consultant's advice, which was very helpful, was a teacher advisory committee. And we had a cross representation between the disciplines, between the age levels and things like that, so that every teacher felt there was somebody in the committee that if they weren't the person themselves, and they were feeling represented. And I would get honest feedback through those conversations about what was working and what wasn't. And it allowed me to then present to the full faculty on those various issues. So very, very powerful point. One last question for this segment. It's a question I ask all of my guests because, someone like you comes in sounding super professional, super polished, knowing exactly what you're talking about. Forgive me for saying it, rattling off the 5 pillars and the 4 Ps and all the things you've shared so far. And I've got my own version of that, but I know for myself that, there's a lot of work and a lot of trial and error and things like that allows you to get to a point, right? They say every winner was once a beginner. So share with us, Meny, please, the biggest mistake you've made in the past that has set you up for future success?
Sure. I think I'll go back to what I mentioned before when I was vulnerable and I said that the inspect what to expect. At multiple times in this 23-year journey, I said, you know what, I want to distance myself fully from operations and I want to bring in people and give them full autonomy without any interaction. And some of those times were pretty, I would probably definitely, I can't say it was a failure, but it was definitely a pivotal moment to say, wait a minute, I'm losing the grip on what's happening. And then I had to go back fully back into it till backing off at one point till I learned what's the balance. So I think if I have to go back to a moment that prepared me for where I am today, but I gotta correct the facts. The fact is that no person, no matter how polished they are and how professional they are, run a smooth business without any hiccups, without any challenges. Still today, the most richest company like Apple, they're sitting in the boardroom sometimes and tearing themselves apart by challenges and issues they have. So I have a tendency, when I close my door after a great day, everything worked out. In my mind, I actually almost say it out loud. I had too good of a day. Something probably happened that I wasn't told yet. Why do I have that mindset? Because I don't want to become comfortable that it's all about success and that everything is working out. No, not every stumbling block is a reason to quit. Business has challenges and we all face challenges, and we live in a world of, we're in the people business. And now finally this person is in the right seat, is not on the right bus. This person is all of a sudden, everything is working out, and now all of a sudden they got an offer and they're moving on. And now all of a sudden you're back to the hiring process. This client, you thought they're signing the contract and everything is working out, something is happening. The economy, there's so many different factors that could, throw you off course from your plan. And this is how the goal is. Not every stumbling block is a reason to quit. It's a matter, okay, what's my detour? But if you only focus on the now and you only focus on doing it, and you can't pause and look at, wait a minute, let me pause a second. Where are we going? Are we on the right track or not? Or you don't even have that North Star where we want to head to. You find yourself that you're losing valuable time in the process. And sometimes it's too late to pick yourself up from what just happened.
Okay, well, that was a powerful conclusion to that first segment. Thank you very much for that. And we're going to now shift to short and sweet responses in the rapid fire. So the first one I have for you is, on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being highest, how well read are you?
I would say 7.
Okay. The funniest or strangest ad you've ever seen?
Ad. Let me see what comes to mind. It's probably the Pepsi ad standing on a Coke bottle.
Okay. Your favorite hobby?
Reading and teaching other people.
A great getaway that's within driving distance of your home?
Probably Prospect Park.
That's pretty close.
Yeah.
Okay. Something we should do each day to become a better person?
Change your habits one step at a time.
And finally, a productivity tip that helps you to get more done?
Use your calendar to schedule time with yourself, not only for meetings with others. Use it to block out time for projects and tasks you need to do for yourself.
Love it. Okay, so Meny, you've shared so much. How can people find you, learn more about you, connect with you? Where do you want to send them?
Sure. So first of all, my podcast, Let's Talk Business, pretty popular out there. You could find it on all the streaming platforms or on our website, ptexgroup.com podcast. On our website, we have a cool feature where you could actually sort it by category. So if you're in sales, leadership, you could actually see all the previous episodes based on those tags, which is categories. So that's a great place. If you want to connect to me on LinkedIn, obviously I'm pretty I post a lot on LinkedIn as well. On our website, there's a link to our WhatsApp group, which I think is over 1,000 people, where business like-minded individuals come together for conversations. And in general, if you feel that what I'm speaking about resonates with you, I want to hear from you. I like feedback. Sometimes we have these one-off conversations on a podcast, and we publish in the World Wide Web and we don't get feedback. If anything resonated with anybody on the show, would love to hear any of those platforms. Reach out, tell me what you liked about it, and this gives just momentum to go on another podcast and share those messages. Because guess what? This is exactly what I needed when I was younger. I needed to see the community come together. I needed to have platforms like podcasts, like what you are hosting, in order to learn more. Because the earlier you learn, the less mistakes you make.
And I'm definitely going to be dropping this content into your chat, because I know I'm a member there. All
Sure.
right. So Meny, you've shared a ton. But as I told you before we started recording, I always ask for a final life lesson. Share with us something you haven't yet discussed that could just be a nice wrap up for this incredible conversation.
Sure. I'll go on the personal side of things. You run a business. When you speak to people, you can ask them, do you have goals? What do you do? They'll always go to the business, what they do financially. I want to tell you something. You as an individual are way more than your business. You could have a business today, you could have a job today, tomorrow you move on, you change, whatever it is. You as an individual never changes. So the more you could focus on you as an individual, on growing yourself, the stronger you're going to be and the better you're going to be. And ultimately, you could change the world. It might not be the full world. It might be your community. It might be your block. It might be your neighbor. It might be your coworker. So what I want to tell you, listening to this episode, I want to make sure you understand that the stronger you are, and you have a lot of potential. Sometimes people say, what could become from me? Every person has so much energy that they're not giving out. If there's one thing, as we said, there's an old expression, if you go to the cemetery, you find a lot of unused energy, unfortunately. So now you're listening to this, you're alive. Use your energy, create yourself personal goals, understand what you are. If you need something to help you strategize that, you could go to our website, ptxgroup.com/goals. Nothing to do with our business, just a free resource. Figure out what are you for in your life. Where do you want to be from a family perspective? Where do you want to be from a spiritual perspective? Where do you want to be from a financial perspective, from a health perspective? If you are a better person, everything around you will be better.
Awesome. And it's a shame I'm not going to be able to cut this up in time, but I'm literally going from this to my mastermind group. And because we're starting a new round, we always start with goals. And not only do we have professional goals, but we have personal goals as well. And
Beautiful.
I would have loved for it's a great message for them to hear. I'll try to do my best to restate it. Meny, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for sharing your wisdom, your experience, your vulnerability as well. Everything really resonated with me, and I'm sure it's going to resonate with everybody who hears it. Much continued success. And thank you so much again for being on Lead to Succeed today.
Thank you so much. And thanks for the opportunity, and continue doing what you're doing. It's doing great.
I appreciate it. Bye-bye now.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode and for investing in yourself so that you can lead to succeed. Before you go, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review the show. Your feedback gives the show more social proof and encourages more folks to listen.